great to be joined by a professional bettor and a just great gambling expert in general. I know that you've heard him on Spanky's podcast, Be Better Bettors. He is best known as Fats. His real first name is Steve, but we'll just call him Fats for this segment. And Steve, it is always great to have you aboard. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It is great to have you aboard. And first things first, before we dive into the various things that we have been seeing in terms of the NFL and college football betting market and how much closing line value has been, just give a little bit of an elevator pitch for those that might be a little bit newer to these peer in terms of just how important it is to wind up getting the best of the number. Because I'm sure that there's a lot of people that say, well, you don't wind up paying the juice if you wind up winning your bets, and you just want to be able to evaluate the teams and everything like that. But I think we both know that the number that you wind up getting, it is absolutely paramount.
There's nothing more important than beating the closing line. And I'm going to give you a stat from Brad Powers. He sent this tweet out the other day, and he took week 1 college football, and he took all the games. That included all the extra games and the FBS games. And he took all the games. He said, a lot of people say, well, it doesn't matter. So somebody that said, all right, I'm going to take all the games that moved 3 points. And then at post, I'm just going to bet those 3 games because I know those are all the hot sides. And he said, if you did that, you went 68, 71, and 3, which is 48%. So that's losing. He said, but if you managed to be savvy enough to predict which way the line was going to move or handicap and get down on those games when they were 3 points better, which you could have done if you knew what you were doing, the difference would have been you'd have been 96 and 47, which is basically a 67% win rate. And he did the same thing this week, but just for the regular boarded games, and there were 42 of them, and you'd have been 18 and 24 if you bet at post all the games that moved 3 points at the closing line. But if you had gotten in at the better number, you would have been 24 and 17, which is 69% also.
And I think that is so important, and you just illustrated it right there, by the way, Brad Powers. One of the best in terms of doing college football, if not the best. He does an amazing job on that front, but I know that you've been doing a great job with your sort of closing line value contest as well, and I know that this applies quite a bit to college football, what we wound up seeing in terms of the Georgia State game, and what are you looking to do in terms of that contest, and what did you wind up noticing from the results that we wound up getting over the weekend?
Well, what I did was I said, for all these people, I had said in a tweet that somebody I was arguing with about closing line value, because they still say it matters which teams you pick. And I said, if you're getting closing line value, you can pick your games out of a hat. It doesn't matter. So what I did was, and I'm going to do this for the entire season, is every Wednesday, I have a random number generator, and I'll tweet out as the picks are selected, and it'll generate the rotation numbers of 20 games. And what I do with those 20 teams that it picks is I assign a spread value of 1 point better than whatever circuit closes the game on Saturday. And then I run that and I just post the results. And the theory is that you should go 10 and 10 because you pick the games at random. But if 1 out of 20 or just 5% of the games, the number matters, you'll either be 10, 9, and 1, which is a win, or 11 and 9. And as it turned out this week, it played out pretty much just like that. The games actually went 10, 9, and 1. But because of the extra point on the Georgia State game, we got to go from 7 to 8. And that made that a winner, and so we ended the week at 11 and 9, which is plus 1.1 unit for the year. And now if you do this in basketball, it would be even stronger. College basketball, college football, everybody says, well, that it doesn't, it's hard. Their games are harder to fall, and that's true. But I still think it's going to hold up over the season in the college football In college basketball, it'll hold up at just 1 point tremendously.
Yep, and when it comes to college basketball as well, I can tell you, when it comes to late game fouling, you need every single point that you can get because you can think that you really have a nice edge. You think that you've got a nice side. Some kid winds up draining a three-pointer at the buzzer, and you have absolutely no idea when it's like, well, thank goodness I had that little bit of a cushion. So I can speak to that all too well. And you mentioned it being able to track college football. And as we know, in football in general, there are the key numbers that you really don't have in other sports, in my opinion. You got your key numbers of 3, 7, 10. If you wind up getting into college football, you're able to go a little bit higher. It's sort of laughable when you wind up seeing like 28 be a key number, but certainly the difference between 27.5 and 28 still means a little bit of something when you wind up getting up that high. But when it comes to being able to take a look at college football, do you think that the same weight should be carried for some of those key numbers as opposed to the NFL? Because as we know, in the NFL, they are absolutely king, because I think that it's sort of a case in which they are still important, but when it gets to college, it can be a little bit more random. I don't know if you agree or disagree, but I do think that taking a look at key numbers in terms of college versus pro is always an interesting topic, and I think that it's important on both fronts.
Well, I think the key numbers are important throughout in both sports. Definitely the NFL key numbers are stronger, but people say, oh, well, in college the 28 doesn't mean anything, or but the 28 means something when the game's sitting around 20, when that's what the spread on the game is. If the spread in the game was 27, then the 28 is a live number at the end of that game, most likely, because they could be up 21, they could be up 35, and depending upon who scores, if there's one more touchdown scored, would make the difference. So it's all relative. Those key numbers are all relative to what the actual spread in the game was. So there's always, like, whenever you're betting, if you can get to, don't settle for 27.5 if you can get 28, and always push for where you can get that extra key number. And in the NFL, it's just paramount. What I've said, somebody asked me once if you could give anybody a tip for betting in the NFL, what would you, one tip you would give them? And I said, if you never lay 3.5, lay 7.5, take 2.5, or take 6.5, your bankroll will be better in the long run. Just, if you can't get to that key number, just pass that game. In the long run, you'll be better off, because enough times you'll take it and it'll fall and you'll lose, and so you might as well just not bet it.
And you speak of key numbers, and this is a question that I've posed a few times on the show, and I want to get your thoughts on it as well, because as we know, when it comes to most teasers, you wind up paying about 10 cents per half a point, and when you're buying points, selling points, that's something that I recommend personally, but typically you find it at 10 cents. As we know, books, they charge more when you wind up going from key numbers, being able to get the hook from like 6.5 up to +7, going down from 7 if you're looking to take a team that is a 7-point favorite, getting down to 6.5, you're going to be charged more than 10 cents. How much would you value, say, going from 2.5 to 3 if you're looking to get to the points, what have you? Because I think that 25 cents might be relatively reasonable. I'm not sure of your thoughts, but I always think that that 25 number is more of what I take a look at when it comes to key numbers rather than a 10.
Oh, in the NFL, back in the day, we used to, when buying on and off the 3 used to be, you would go from -10 to -1/4. We used to make a killing by, if the game was 2.5, 3, or 3.5, we would just call up there was a big place that took 50,000, and you would call up and you'd say, give me minus, if the line was 3, you would say, give me +3.5 -1/4 for 50,000. And then they go right to 2.5. And then you say, okay, let me lay back to 2.5 for 50,000. And that was worth it, and that was lucrative. And after about a season and a half of beating them up on that, they went to -$1. They charged 20 cents. So you'd have to go from +3 flat to +3.5 -30. There was still value in buying the half point, and laying the extra 20 cents, or going through it, laying 50 cents, but not so much for trying to middle it, but just for straight out betting it. And so we were on that, and now they charge us 25 cents extra. So
Yep, I do
that was
think
the end of that party.
there that is certainly something that has expanded, and I know something else that is popular. Looking at the value in contests, we will do that next with Fats right here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. Being rejoined by his real name is Steve. His nickname is Fats. You know him throughout the industry, one of the most respected bettors that you're gonna find. And I know that something that we want talking about a little bit earlier today is just taking a look at contest strategy, because as we know, when these contest lines wind up coming out on late Wednesday, early Saturday, or early Thursday, whether it be the Circa Millions, Westgate Super Contest, you're able to go down the line. They're set. They are not going to be moving at all with line movement. So when you do wind up seeing injuries, news coming out, what have you, you still wind up getting that line. And when it comes to playing in some of these contests, obviously I think that you'd agree with me, taking as much time as possible is very important. But when are some cases where you'd rather take a little bit of a better line and get that closing line value in terms of the contest, and sometimes where it might not have as much value as you might think?
Well, there's a lot of times what happens is, like you said, there's an injury in a game. Maybe let's say the line was 1.5, and all of a sudden it's 4.5 or 5. And sometimes people say, well, you know what? Everybody's going to take that game. So I don't want to take that. I don't want to bet that game. Or I'm going to try and beat everybody. I'm going to take the plus 1.5. Okay. That's a mistake, in my opinion. I mean, if you want to pass on the game and pick another, but don't take the bad number trying to go for the 2-for-1. The other thing is, early in the season, don't be afraid to take the good number -1.5, thinking, well, everybody's going to take that because it's 3 points up. If you look at the distribution at the end of the week, it'll still only be 30. Maybe if a lot of people do it, it'll only be 30 or 40% took that game. Well, that means 60% didn't take it. So you're still picking up on more than half the field in that situation. Times where you might want to avoid the good number. A perfect example of this would have been last week on the Eagles-Lions game. The Eagles went for, I think, had a contest number of 3.5. At least I know it did on DraftKings. I'm not sure what the Circa number was.
Circa number was 4. I would know. I took it.
So on that game, well, using my 3.5 theory, you never want to lay 3.5. By the way, it's okay to lay 4, but don't lay 3.5. And so anyway, if you're on that game, that's one where, you know what, you're going to get 2.5 points because the line's 6 and the number's 3.5. But you're still laying 3.5. So that's a good one. Maybe pick another game and maybe hope it falls 3 and you catch a lot of people and you'll pick up some ground. But you're not, from 3.5 to 6, you're not stealing as much as if you were getting your better number on the other side of the 2.5. So that would be another strategy for stuff like that. Now, real late in the year, if you're high up in the standings, real late in the year, it's to your advantage to pick those games because those are just games that people are going to have to overcome to beat you, and you're the favorite on all of them. So you should maintain be able to maintain your position better. And if you're trying to chase somebody, if you're trying to come up in the standings, you might want to skip those games and just pick something better to try to chase. But don't pick something that's just at a ridiculously bad line to do that. That would be my 2 cents on the point spread contests.
I think that is such good advice, because we do notice that there are quite a few people are like, well, even though I'm taking a few points less, I'm able to gain a point on the field. And it's like, well, you could still wind up having someone go 5-0, even if they don't wind up betting that, or they don't wind up picking that game altogether for contests as well. So I do think that sometimes, because you have so many offerings on the board this time of year, you get 16 games, even with the bye weeks typically. You still have 13, 14 games. just passing on it altogether if you don't want to be like anti-air quotes here, everything else. That'd be much better than just trying to take some terrible number. And word of advice from you, I probably should not have taken the Philadelphia Eagles at 4. I realized that immediately after I wound up doing so. But when it comes to the contest as well, we noticed that in the Circa Survivor contest, bloodbath in week 1. Over half of the entries are down, out for the count. I think that I wound up taking until about halfway through the season last year for half the contest entries to be out. It was relatively... I'll let you go ahead.
I had sent out a tweet about that last night, the not count before the Denver, or the other night on Sunday night before the Denver game. But after the Denver game, 56% of the field is gone. And I commented last year, I remember the first 7 weeks of the season, every favorite 7.5 points or more was winning. There was never any big thing. And I asked about that, and they responded to me, and they said last year there was 683 people were eliminated the first week, which was only 16%. But going into week 8, 2,131 out of 4,080 were still alive. And then that was the week 8 was the week that all the big upsets, and it dropped to 1,188. So they lost a huge percentage there. They went down to they lost 50% up until that point, and then they lost another half of that. They were down to 29% after that. So that was a big anomaly, and this week was totally the opposite of that. And I got to tell you, every time I play a Survivor contest, I am the master of finding a way to lose in the first round of the first week. And so I had 5 contests in the DraftKings contest, and so I took 2 with Baltimore. And I said to myself, I thought I was such a genius because I said, you know what? I think Chicago could win. I'm not crazy about San Francisco. So I'm not crazy about the Colts. I wasn't crazy about the Titans. I wasn't even crazy about Cincinnati. I like Denver, so I went with 2 Denvers, 2 Baltimores, and a Cincinnati. And I still managed to only get 2 wins out of 5. So, but a total bloodbath for everybody. Everybody had a big beating on that first week, and that is a big anomaly. I don't think in the history of Survivors contests, I don't think there's ever been that big of a bloodbath week 1, percentage-wise on the field.
And I just can't remember having 10 home underdogs, wound up becoming 9 with the Vikings going from an underdog to a favorite, ever occurring on week number 1 as well. And just when it comes to the Survivor contest as well, I know that there are some people that they like to roadmap it out. I don't think that this is the best route to go, just because every year we're going to see surprise teams. Like, for example, the Cincinnati Bengals last year. They probably weren't on anyone's radar to be a team that you need to bank for Survivor. But when it comes to the Survivor contest, I think that one of the biggest things, if you are looking to make a deep run, always save those teams that are going to be playing on Thanksgiving and Christmas, because there are some Survivor pools that they make them their own week. I don't know if you have any tips for banking teams or anything like that in this final minute, but I think that that's one that is certainly important, especially this season.
Oh, I was thinking about it like this. If you were lucky enough to use Baltimore or maybe sneak by with New Orleans last week, then you managed to bank all those teams that everybody else picked this week that you can get them back now. Like San Fran's now a 9-point favorite this week. Denver's a 10-point favorite this week. So a lot of those teams, you wouldn't have been, if they won, you wouldn't have been able to use them. But if you had used somebody else, they're still alive to the people. So a consolation, I guess, of some sorts.
Absolutely. And Steve, better known as Fats, I know that you do an absolutely amazing job just in the sports betting world. I know that you've done great things just for so many years, and it was great to have you aboard tonight and lend your insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
That is the legend himself, Steve Fats Diano. It was great to be able to have him aboard, and we talked a little bit of strategy. Coming up next, got to give you some picks for this MLB board for Wednesday right here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.